Alright, so we got a couple of new packs in Master Duel. One at the end of last month in November, and then one at the start of this month, December. And we also have a Duelist Cup this month. So let's go over some of the best decks and not so best decks of this format, starting with some of the newer cards. So first off, we have to talk about Draco Tail. Draco Tail is by far the most hyped deck from the most recent packs. It's like not even close in terms of popularity. And I'm just going to start by putting them up here. So there's two main variants of Draco Tail. One is the branded Draco Tail, one is the Magistus Draco Tail. There's other variants. Obviously, there's more ways you can play Draco Tail, but I think these are going to be by far the two best ones and the two most popular ones and the two most played ones that you'll have to worry about. And I'll put them in tier 1. Now, tentatively, I will not say that these are definitively the best deck. Like, there's an actual argument that Draco Tail is actually not even the best deck of this format, and it's an argument that I'm willing to listen to. But, you know, it is up for debate. But clearly, Draco Tail is at least among like a top 2, minimum top 3 deck. But like, you ask most people, they'll probably say it's top 1, at least based on representation, because this is, new pack and all that stuff. This is like definitely the most played deck of the. From the most played deck in Master Duel as of right now. We'll see if the meta progresses by stage 2, but I have a feeling that like this will hold. So yeah, Draco Tail has it's a solid mid range deck. It's not a super oppressive combo deck. Well, at least compared to previous meta decks that we've had before, and at least one of the versions does not focus on comping, which is the branded version, and it runs a decent amount of hand traps. The main thing is that it has its own in-archetype hand trap, Fimena, and it allows for turn 0 plays and turn 0 fusions. So you can go Fimena into like Arphalion to bounce your opponent's monsters or other fusions, and then the Draco Tail monsters, when they're fused off, also gain additional effects. So you can start playing on turn 0, which is, obviously that's an advantage for going second. When going second is like so rough in Master Duel, especially, but like just in Yu-Gi-Oh in general, when you can jump start that and when you lose the coin flip and not have to feel so far behind, that is a positive. And in terms of the two variants, so branded Draco Tail is the more we'll say low to the ground version. It mainly focuses on just getting out the Draco Tail fusions and back row with the occasional branded fusion on your field, such as Sanctifier Dragon. And out of the TCG, OCG, and Master Duel, I think Master Duel has the best version of branded Draco Tail, because Master Duel is the only format where Verte is legal. So the fact that you can just go into Verte to access your branded fusion, to dump a Phyrexo as well to get another set off your to trigger another Draco Tail effect to set a spell trap, and have a Sanctifier Dragon as an additional disruption on your opponent's turn is like actually really nice. And like the real key piece to why branded Draco Tail is a lot more consistent in Master Duel, and branded fusion just acts as even more starters. So yeah, the deck's consistent. It's very resilient to most hand traps. Like the Draco Tail does not really lose to many hand traps at all, except for exactly Retaliating Sea. So we will see if Retaliating Sea sees play or not. Sorry, that was a lot of C's there, but I'm not sure if Draco Tail is enough of the meta to warrant maining a card almost specifically. It feels like for the Draco Tail matchup, especially when like the deck, even though it is resilient to hand traps, it also doesn't put up the most oppressive end board, and a lot of decks are able to play into it. Not every deck, some decks will have problems, but there are some decks that are able to play into the end board, which is not the case for, like an example, a full Malice end board we've had in the past. That being said, the other version of Draco Tail, Magistus Draco Tail, is a bit more combo heavy and puts up a bit more oppressive of end boards, because on top of the Draco Tail stuff, instead of having the like a Sanctifier Dragon with the branded version, you will put up negates like Savage Dragon and put up floodgates like Kaliga, and you will also access Secretarian Dragon more often in your combos. So the end boards are way stronger in the Magistus version, The trade-off is that the Magician's version is also weaker into certain hand traps. So like the Magician's version plays more into Maxi, more into Fool Laws, and more into Droll. Whereas the branded Draco Tail version generally does not really care as much about Maxi. It does not care about Droll at all a lot of times, and Fool Laws is like an upstart goblin. Whereas if you get hit by any of those while playing or trying to do your Magician's combo, you either have to cut your combo short or give your opponent like a bunch more draws. The other side of that is that like, your end board is way stronger, and you arguably are sometimes better into the other fairer hand traps, because Valor and Imperm are seeing rise in play now because they actually hit Draco Tail, such as hitting the Arphalion from adding cards back from the grave. But if you play the a more combo heavy version with more extenders, such as the Magician's version, then you can play through those fairer 1/1 hand traps better at the cost of playing into the floodgatey turn skipping hand traps worse. So based on whichever one is the better version, it's going to be based on the meta developments, the very specific meta developments over the next couple of weeks leading up to Stage 2 of the Duelist Cup, and we'll see which one is actually the better version of Draco Tail. Right now, I'll tentatively put it like this because I think branded Draco Tail is more played than Magician's Draco Tail at the very least, so I'll keep it like these two for now. But yeah, another deck from the newest pack, which is the one that I think the people are least interested about, except for exactly Disencoder. We're talking about Archmage, and right off the bat, because Archmage is a Disencoder deck, I kind of want to just straight up throw it in here. Like this is like the definition, the prime example of a Disencoder deck. Just he plays all of the rogue decks and one tricks and like mains, pet decks, all of the rogue decks that people tend not to give their time of day to. But yeah, Archmage actually has a pretty decent board when set up. It has hard omni negates. It has board wide negates. It has a board wipe. It has pretty layered interruptions, all things considered. It's just the main problem with Archmage. Well, there's a couple problems with it, but like the two main ones are, one, it's really bad into the big three anti-combo hand traps, and by those I mean Maxi, Droll, and Nibiru. Those are being bad into all three of those is really rough because you're gonna be facing at least one. When any deck you play against is gonna be playing at least 1 to 2 of those. Like you're gonna be facing Maxi against every deck, and not having a great plan to Maxi is a bit rough. Like not having a way to play around Nib pretty much at all. Like in order to play around Nib, you essentially have to Nibiru yourself by cutting your end board in half. So like you're self-nibbing yourself by trying to avoid getting nibbed. That's kind of like the purpose of trying to play around Nib in the first place, right? And obviously Droll is, a lot of rogue decks do struggle with Droll. And another thing with Archmage is that it has a very funny lock that I'm not sure I've ever seen in another archetype, but it has usually when decks lock themselves, they lock themselves into like a specific type of card from the extra deck, or like just like in total like anywhere. But in Archmage, it locks you to summoning specifically Archmage monsters from anywhere except the extra deck. So like in theory, you can make whatever the hell you want from the extra deck, but you can only use Archmage materials for it, which is like kind of, I'm not sure I've seen that kind of lock before. But the main thing is that the starter, like its field spell, requires you to discard spell cards, and that is, or discard spell and trap cards, I believe. Which more experienced Archmage players can correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be a bit restrictive in deck building, seeing as how you need to run spells and trap cards as like your non-engine choices in order to make your field spell alive. Like you can't just go super ham on only hand traps, because then you won't have enough spell and traps to discard. So like it feels like it encourages you to run board breakers in a sense, which being forced to run board breakers and not having that choice is one thing, but also board breakers are kind of weird, and there's like a lot of decks where you don't want a board breaker because they put up unfair end boards, like not Draco Tail in particular. Draco Tail you're probably fine playing board breakers into, but like more combo decks that we'll get into later, you really want hand traps for them, and being semi-forced to run board breakers seems like a bit of an issue there. So I'll keep this in Rogue, and like if anyone does well with it, I'm open to moving up, because my experience with Archmage is obviously limited, as I'm sure most people's is. Like, has anyone played against or queued against an Archmage yet since the new pack dropped? Then we have Odon. Like, oh boy, like there are like a few ways to play with Odon. You can play with the Primite cards, you can play with hand traps, but like by and large, the main way that people play Odon is just as basically a heavy back row floodgate deck. And in fact, you see I've somewhat grouped the main heavy back row decks together here. But yeah, so Odon is basically the only main monster it has is this Man with the Mark, and it sets up the whole thing where it sets up like your back row sets up a bunch of Apophis, continuous spell and traps, and like there's like an Omnigate there to protect your back row from like board breakers, and obviously being a heavy back row deck, some of your trap cards do tend to be of the continuous and floodgate nature. That being said, Odon, compared to basically almost every other heavy back row deck, can run a specific trap lineup that it can actually help with it going second as well, and not just for floodgating going first. Because a lot of Odon builds run the full Dominus trap lineup. That we're talking 3 Purge, 3 Dominus Impulse, and 3 Songs of the Dominator. And these are all back row. Obviously, they're trap cards, but they're trap cards that can be used going second as real hand traps. And even among back row decks, a lot of back row decks cannot run a full suite of Dominus trap cards, because the attribute restriction is just too much. Even Labyrinth, for example, Labyrinth can run Dominus Impulse, but Labyrinth would not be caught dead running Dominus Purge. Like, if you run Dominus Purge, the entire point of your Labyrinth monsters goes away. But Odon does not really care if you get locked out of using all monster effects. Like, if you use a Purge and you use a Dominus Impulse from hand, theoretically you can't use any monster effects. But because your most important monsters are trap cards, and losing, not being able to use Man at the Mark does suck a little bit, but you don't need to rely on Man at the Mark to get your engine going. If you just draw the field spell, hard draw the field spell, like that's already enough to get your engine going. And then all of your actual monster disruption, quote unquote monster disruption, they're really just continuous trap cards masquerading as monsters. But none of those are really affected by the Dominus restrictions. And then the more Dominus cards you use, the better they get, because as you have trap cards in your graveyard, the Dominus cards then pop cards on top of that, and the Songs of the Dominator can search additional Dominus trap cards. Like, imagine like Dominus Impulse and then Dominator negating your opponent's monster effect, and then searching another Dominus Impulse. That's crazy if you're able to do that. So yeah, this deck, it's weird to say, but like the Odon deck is like maybe the best actual deck at going second, just because of its ability to run the Dominus lineup of trap cards, which is what I've been seeing has been having the most success. So actually, like, this is like a dark horse pick, and I actually like it better than the Labyrinth. Like, Labyrinth, I actually rank it higher than Labyrinth in terms of back row decks. And Labyrinth got an alt art, like Lady Labyrinth. You're seeing the alt art right here, but it didn't actually get any new cards in the pack, which is like funnily enough. It just dropped the alt art and Trapaholic, which Trapaholic, like, low-key, like I didn't realize this, but Trapaholic kind of sucks in Labyrinth in particular, because you need trap cards in graveyard to trigger to get Trapaholic to be able to use the traps it sets immediately. But Labyrinth tends to not keep a very full graveyard full of trap cards, because between the welcome Labyrinths either banishing themselves to bounce your opponent's cards, or resetting, like the big welcome Labyrinths banishing themselves, and the welcome Labyrinths, regular welcome Labyrinths resetting themselves, and then your Labyrinth your Lady Labyrinth or your Lovely Lady, resetting the trap cards back from your graveyard, like you just don't have like you just don't have like 3 traps or more in your graveyard a lot of times, and especially like some other traps you might run like what is that card called? Like Jesus, Transaction Rollback. Like that's another trap card that just banishes itself. So like yeah, Trapaholic is just kind of not great. Is not great in Labyrinth in particular. Like it's better in nearly almost every other trap deck than Labyrinth itself, even though the art might suggest otherwise. So yeah, because of that, Labyrinth didn't really change. Like it like a couple bans ago, I maybe forgot to talk about this last tier list I did, but they got its furnitures back, and that's like hardly irrelevant because the way playing Furniture Lab was just kind of really outdated. Like the furniture should have been back at 3 like a year ago, for crying out loud. Furniture Labyrinth has not been the best way to play Labyrinth in a long time, and it still remains to be the case because Floodgates are just so much better. And by Floodgates, I guess I mean the normal trap lingering turn skip Floodgates, and not like the continuous one. So stuff like Banquet of Millions, which has been the most popular one for the past few months, which was specifically because the existence of Malice made a lot of your normal traps that you would run in the past kind of bad. Like Simultaneous Equation Cannon, really bad into Malice. Different Dimension Ground, really bad into Malice. Dimensional Barrier, really bad into Malice. And theoretically, with Malice getting heavily hit on the ban list and projected to see a very high decrease in play, those other options for trap cards might come back into favor, depending on how much Malice play decreases because of the ban list. So that's to be seen. The deck is still like really strong going first because again, setting up a floodgate through that's relatively hard to stop with traditional hand traps is a decent deal. But going second it's rough. You do technically. Labyrinth can run Dominus Impulse and Songs of the Dominator, but like it can't run Purge as well on top of that. That's like a bridge too far. So you have to rely on like more. If you're playing the furniture stuff, you have to rely on more gimmicky like 2 to 3 card combinations with Lady Labyrinth and like Welcome Labyrinth and certain other combinations of trap cards, which are obviously not reliable going second because 5 mana does that with one as like a 1.5 card combo, and like Labyrinth requires you twice as many cards in order to achieve the similar effect. But Labyrinth was never known for its prowess going second. And speaking of back row decks that aren't very good going second, we have Eldlich, which got a few new support cards from the last pack at the end of November, including a new Eldlich trap card and a cool way for a cool send off Delta of the Invitation to field spell that helps going second. Like if your opponent does not know of the existence of Tartarus, they will get blown out by it once because they'll just let the Delta of Invitation resolve, and then they'll get the Tartarus will wipe their board. But if they know about its existence, then like they'll probably stop it before he gets there. But yeah, despite all that, Eldlich for the most part is still being played the exact same way it's been played for like 2 years now, which is as a back row floodgate deck. It's just like I can't really. There's not very much interesting to say about that, other than I think it's worse out of the 3 back row decks we've talked about so far. I think it is the worst of the 3. It's worse than Odon. It's worse than Labyrinth because even though it has engine and like cards that theoretically play into boards, I feel like it is like the worst going second because it doesn't run the hand traps, the quote unquote hand trap, the Dominus cards that the Odon and Labyrinth decks run, and therefore it just relying on like somewhat unreliable engine to break boards as opposed to actual non-engine to try and stop your opponent is always less reliable as a way to go second. So like this might be harsh, but like we have not really had Eldlich on our mind for like a years now because it's just been it's just not really been relevant, and I don't see like the support really changing it that much, especially for the play style that Eldlich wants to do, which is basically unchanged from like what it's always tried to do. And another thing is that in versus the Draco Tail matchup, so here's one advantage that backrow decks do have versus a Draco Tail, versus like in the Draco Tail matchup. If Draco Tail is expected to be a very common matchup, having advantages in that matchup is a good thing. So like back row decks tend not to care so much about the disruption that the Draco Tail puts up, at least in main engine wise. 5 mana's fusing into Arphalions to bounce monsters, like, who really cares about bouncing monsters in a trap deck? That's not the main point of trap decks. Flame, for example, only negates spell cards, not trap cards. So like the majority of your back row are trap cards and not spell cards. So that goes for like every back row deck. So like you don't really care about Flame, you don't care about Horn bouncing your monsters, because again, the monsters are not the main point of your deck. And yeah, there is one thing though that might be annoying, is Sting, specifically for Labyrinth and Eldlich. So not every Draco Tail deck will run Sting. Especially the Magician's version any hybrid version that's not exactly branded Draco Tail tends to not run Sting. So, that might not even be something you have to worry about in a lot of Draco Tail matchups. But Sting is really annoying for Eldlich and even Labyrinth to a lesser extent, because it banishes trap cards, not just monsters. But banishing monsters is already kind of bad enough. Like banishing an Eldlich, it's kind of annoying. But the fact that a Sting can banish an Eldlich monster and one of your Eldlich and Eldland spell traps in the graveyard, especially the turn they were sent there, because they can't activate until the next turn. So being able to getting 2 of your resources from your grave removed off of 1 card that pluses your Draco Tail opponent is actually like really annoying. Like normally, like you would be able to ignore a lot of your Draco Tail interruption. Like it's basically just Argilla popping your back row that's the main thing you have to worry about. But Sting, stings. Sorry, I had to throw it out there. And same for Labyrinth. Like if you use a Welcome Labyrinth or a Big Welcome Labyrinth, and then on the same turn, like you have another like Furnisher in graveyard, the Sting can get rid of both of them. That's really that's actually quite annoying. Like if they're on that, but yeah. And next we have White Forest, the other, probably the most hyped deck from the end of November pack. So yeah, White Forest, it's a combo deck. It's if it goes unchecked, it will put up a board that is pretty much unbreakable by most standards. It's a very strong end board, has multiple negates, multiple forms of disruption. If you're playing a normal deck with Engine, you're probably not going to break it. Its end board is way stronger, for example, than like Draco Tail, especially branded Draco Tail. Like I don't think branded Draco Tail can come close to as strong of an end board as the new White Forest makes. And there are really good advantages to playing White Forest as a combo deck, mainly because this is one of the few combo decks that actually has good plays under Maxi and Fool Loss, unlike pretty much any other combo deck. Because you have back row that you can search, and you can sit on, the classic White Forest trap cards like Woes, which lets you synchro into a Silvera on your opponent's turn to Books of Eclipse their field, or the Azamina or Sinful Spoils quick play spells or trap cards like White Forest of the Sinful Spoils, which lets you fusion summon on your opponent's turn. So like you can make a Guardian Chimera on your opponent's turn. You have multiple of these spell and trap cards that you can just search on minimal special summons and just use them as interruptions on your opponent's turn, which, you can do that for like 1 to sometimes no maxi draws, which is really nice. But obviously, this is a deck that probably searches more than like almost any other deck in the game. So this Droll is absolutely killer. And to quote the highest rated White Forest player from last season, their words, not mine. White Forest is a deck that runs a moderate amount of crash cards and bricks. So yeah, you take the good with the bad. It is not the perfect combo deck, and it also, going second, because it's a deck that requires you to commit multiple cards to your combos because of discards and all that stuff, it's not great going second. So yeah. That being said, it's probably better than the other deck from that pack, which is just straight up psychics, which I'm not sure I see. This is probably just a me problem, but I'm not sure I see the appeal of psychics, because 90% of the builds that I see with psychics are psychic with punk. And to me, when I see a deck like that, I'm wondering, why do you need to put the psychic cards with punk? Why not just play punk like without the psychic cards? Isn't that better? Like, Punk Fiendspit was like a relatively decent tier 3-ish deck a while back. So like, does like removing Fiendspit cards and adding psychic cards and psychic bricks make punk better? Or I'm not sure about that. And then when you don't play the punk cards and you're just trying to play quote unquote pure psychic, the deck is like, just seems really, it's like that plays like quite a number of bricks for like the few amount of stars it has. It seems kind of mid. Obviously not great going second, but I guess because you're playing such a low engine count at that point, like, you do have room for more hand traps, and you can make use of, I guess the advantage is that you can make use of like side frame trap cards like Gamma and Delta and not feel terrible about it, because you can make Lambda and to just make them live even if you open with them going first. But I mean, that would be a lot better if Gamma was at more than one copy, which unfortunately it's only at one copy, I think, in every format. So this is probably way too harsh, but I personally don't see the appeal of like playing psychics, or I don't see the niche of playing psychics, as NBT would say.
This is ass. When it comes to psychic monsters, Punk's already able to do cold fusion if you're willing to dump your hand into the yard. Why complicate things with a half dozen more bricks that dramatically simplify your end board?
So then we're on to the juicy stuff. Okay, now that we've covered all of the quote unquote new decks from the selection packs, this is probably the part where people are anticipating. Okay, Malice. Where does Malice fit now? Red Ransom got banned. Huge blow to the deck. Where does Malice sit now? It is no longer the best deck in the format, which, the spoilers, like, I'm sure nobody was expecting that. But where does it land now? So I will put my placement first, then I will tend to justify myself and explain myself. But Malice. Tier 2. And mind you, this is the first deck I'm putting in tier 2. This is not in the lower half of tier 2 either. This is one of the higher tier 2 decks, if that. If not higher. I'm labbing out combos. I was trying to see if there's anything, if Malice was still worth looking into post ban list. You bet your ass it is. This was what I was worried about. This was what I was like, when I saw the Red Ransom ban, I was like, I almost didn't want to ask the question, is Malice still a top tier deck without Red Ransom? Like, I didn't even want to consider the thought, because that might have broken me at that instant, because I was preparing for a Maliceless Master Duel heading into the next month. But yeah, now that I've looked into like more combo lines, now that I've seen it in action, I've seen it, other people play it. Red Ransom ban, man, like it definitely hurts. The Malice was the best deck prior to the Red Ransom ban, but even without Red Ransom, it's still, in my opinion, still up here for number one. Okay, so the main blow by hitting Red Ransom is that it lost a huge resilience to hand traps, like stuff like Ash Blossom, Imperm, Veilers, more fair 1-for-1 hand traps like that. They actually do affect your combo now, and Nibiru as well, especially Nibiru. Like those kinds of hand traps, if you have a 1-card starter and you get hit by one of those hand traps, those do significant damage to your combo now. Sometimes they even stop your 1-card combo with one hand trap, which it seems fair, trading 1 card to stop another card. Prior to the Red Ransom ban, when you had Red Ransom, all of those hand traps that I mentioned before, they basically did jack shit to Malice at any point, like to any one card combo. You could just almost always play through it with almost any other card in hand, including, by the way, fucking just normal summoning a hand trap beats end perm like most of the time. That's how fucking stupid it was. So that is no longer the case. You cannot just blindly ignore and like be ignorant to every single hand trap all the time. That being said, though, if you have extenders make the hand trap math way more in your favor as the Malice player, because Malice has some of the best extenders in the game, between like March Hare and Backup Agnister, and even Bestios to an extent. All of them, when used properly, can generate more than one body. They generate multiple bodies. And when you give a Cybersect multiple bodies, you know, you're basically just letting them do whatever the hell they want at that point. So while your one card combos get stopped more often by single hand traps now, if you draw extenders, sometimes it feels like it almost feels like there was barely any hit at all. Like it almost feels like you never needed Red Ransom, because your extenders generate so much bodies for you to allow you to play through hand traps that having one extender can like help you beat two, if not more, hand traps still a lot of the time. And another thing about Malice is that Malice is very well positioned into this format. It is like, it's not only just a good deck, it is a good meta call, because if Draco Tail is the most popular deck, Malice is one of the decks that has the best match. It's one of the decks that has the single best matchup into Draco Tail and any Draco Tail variants, because of its ability to just hit the graveyard. Because, by the way, White Binder still legal, so you still can blaze your opponent's graveyard with White Binder. Malice is a Dominance Impulse deck, so any deck that can run Dominance Impulse automatically gives it extra points versus any fusion deck, which, by the way, Draco Tail is a fusion deck. You just Dominance Impulse the affects the fusion summon, and that's a big deal. And furthermore, Malice, people have gone even further than that. Like beyond just like Dominance Impulse, they've been running war crime stuff like the Dimension cards, like Dimension Fisher and Dimension Shifter, just as additional anti-meta stuff. Which, like, I personally don't think that's even necessary, because if you go first and you combo off, you still already win if you go first and combo, even with this post Red Ransom Malice. So that I feel like you don't need D-Fissure. D-Shifter, I guess, is fair, because if you draw the one of, it helps going second. So that's a thing. But yeah, being able to run anti-meta floodgate lingering type, anti-meta, anti-graveyard floodgate type cards, on top of just having some of the best non-engine available to you, because you have access to Dominance Impulse, on top of having still probably one of the strongest turn ones. You have, like, the way I'm talking about it right now, I feel like I might have Malice even too low at tier 2, which is scary to think about, that tier 2 after Red Ransom Band is somehow too low for Malice. But the main problem with Malice is that it has a lot of cards on the ban list. Okay, it has a lot of limitations on its cards. Okay, sometimes you just don't draw a good hand because of all of the cards that you aren't allowed to run. Like one Chessy Cat, one Dormouse, one Gold Shark, one Underground. Like there will be hands where you don't draw any of those, and those are the worst hands you can produce. And like you have to hope on hitting blind allures and stuff like that. So like this deck will lose to itself as often as it loses to other things, which is, I guess, like having a consistency issue like that is why it's down here. Whereas Draco Tail doesn't have that consistency issue. But yeah, don't ignore Malice. Okay, ignore Malice at your own peril. Another deck hit by the ban list sort of is Fiends of Gemini. So Fiends of Gemini was the deck that got Christia banned, so no more Christia locking. And if that was only hit the Fiends of Gemini, like that's not really that big of a hit at all. You have other ways to do stuff. Like instead of just flagging your opponent, you can just search like 5 heralds to your hand instead. Like I'm talking Herald of the Orange Light and Herald of the Green Light, and then your opponent still probably can't break through that. But the main thing about Fiends of Gemini is, and why I'm actually putting it down a tier, like I had a tier 1 last season, but I'm putting it here because Fiends of Gemini is like one of the decks that has a rougher matchup into Draco Tail than most. Like, whereas Malice has a very good matchup into Draco Tail, and in fact, a lot of people were speculating that they hit Malice so hard by banning Red Ransom specifically because they wanted to, sell the pack with Draco Tail out, because they knew that if Malice was unhit from the ban list, that it would still remain the best deck, and Malice would absolutely demolish Draco Tail. So like they didn't want that, so they wanted to nerf Malice to a degree. Well, anyways, like back to Fiends of Gemini. Fiends of Gemini has a decently rough matchup into Draco Tail because of its reliance on its normal summon. That being said, if you draw Orange Light every hand like a god, then you can just Orange Light the 5 mana every time, and you'll be Gucci, or Call by the 5 mana every time and have the out the 5 mana and not get 5 mana, then you'll be fine. But if you're going first and you normal summon something like a Nepirim, and they do something as simple as 5 mana, go for Arphalion bounce Nepirim, like that cuts off so many of your plays, because it's so hard to then being able to extend into Phantom Chords, which is like one of your main like plays in your deck. And like going second, that's even worse, because on top of the option for Arphalion to bounce your Nepirim, they also have now Horn to bounce the Nepirim, and without being able to stick the Nepirim on the field, like your Gemini engine is so much harder to access. And even the Fiends of engine going second, if your opponent is playing Sting, like that's rough. That means your Fiends of engine it's really hard to resolve going second into a Sting. Going first, though, it's at least the Fiends of engine is a slightly better going first, because the Fiends of engine gives you an option to make Caesar, which Caesar is really good, especially into Draco Tail. So like that's like one thing. It's not a hopeless matchup, but it's not a favorable matchup. And like before, Gemnight's advantage was that it didn't lose to any of the high impact floodgate hand traps that were being played. When Malice was like the top dog and Lancia was everywhere, like you didn't really care that much about Lancia. You didn't care about Droll compared to other decks like Risio. But now you care about 5 mana more than most other decks do. So that is a bit of an issue there. So there's an argument that like the better deck into the Draco Tail matchup then is actually the Blind Second Gemini, which probably that is true. Blind Second Gemini is probably better into Draco Tail specifically compared to Fiends of Gemini, just because like board breakers, you can deal with the trap cards and blow up the trap cards, or you can run like Red Reboot, for example. Red Reboot, insane versus Draco Tail for obvious reasons. So yeah, you have a lot better options playing into Draco Tail end board. But going second, Draco Tail is not like the problem. Draco Tail is not the main problem deck going second decks. Hey, the main problem for going second decks is everything else. Like trying to go second to a White Forest deck that does full combo, that's a bit rough. Trying to go second into Malice still, it's a bit rough. Even for example, going second versus an opposing Fiends of Gemini deck, like the Fiends of Gemini deck going first has the advantage over the blind second Fiends of Gemini. But it does make a case that like, because the most common deck probably now in Draco Tail is more vulnerable to going second, just because it makes a slightly weaker of an end board and doesn't really stack that many negates up. Heavy board breaker decks have now a new target to prey on. Even though I still do not like the approach of running only board breakers and a blind second deck, because there are still too many other decks that will just end the game and like end you if you let them do their full combo that aren't exactly Draco Tail. So it's kind of weird to judge blind second decks, but I would say they are slightly better now, just because Malice probably, at the very least, even if Malice like is still a very good deck, Malice will undoubtedly see a drop in usage, and Draco Tail obviously takes up a huge portion of usage. So like your matchup spread just gets better by default, and people may also be less on Droll, which I guess is less of a deal for Gemnites in particular compared to some of the other blind second or like going second leaning decks. Like Sky Striker, it's still weird. Like to me, I still don't think you should run a blind second Striker deck. I think you should still play like the mid-rangey, like going first striker deck with a bunch of hand traps, as opposed to, or if not hand traps, at least a bunch of board breakers that are usable going first and second, and not just maxed out on stuff like Lightning Storm or like actual full-on board breakers or like Red Reaver or like stuff like that, because there are still, we haven't gone to all the decks yet, but as you can see, we will be getting to decks where you definitely don't want to always blind second against if you have the choice to. You may want to blind second against, Draco Tail, for example. The Draco Tail's board is relatively easy to crack, easier to crack than other decks is with, the Striker engine. So, like, Striker has a good matchup versus Draco Tail comparatively to other decks. Like, Gemini Fiends has like a kind of a bad or a mediocre matchup into Draco Tail. Sky Striker has a pretty decent matchup into Draco Tail, but it's like everything else that's besides Draco Tail that still remains a problem for Striker. But I will favor Striker over like the pure blind second decks because it has the option of going first. Whereas if you're playing a pure blind second deck, obviously you're never gonna pick going first like blind. So it's like Tempai, for example. So Tempai is like very funny. I think if you were just to compare blind second Striker Tempai or blind second Sky Striker versus blind second Striker Tempai, I think blind second Striker Tempai is better than blind second Sky Striker playing like the same Striker engine, because blind second Tempai will end the game in OTK every time it gets a chance to, whereas that may not be the case for Sky Striker. But I also don't think that that's the best way to play either deck. The blind second Sky Striker with a bunch of board breakers, because as the aforementioned, because of the aforementioned combo decks, that you don't want to let them go first and go comboing uninterrupted. Like that's not ideal. And also like sometimes like you will, because they tend to draw cards, especially like Malice still, if they ever draw into a critical mass of non-engine, I mean, there's like nothing you can do. They draw into a droll and you're playing a board breaker deck, like you just have to eat it, and like the game is automatically over the moment you're a blind second deck that gets drolled. Like it's especially the Sky Striker Tempai deck, like the game is basically just over at that point, and you're just letting them get access to their draws for free by not playing hand traps. So it's why I think the best way to play Tempai is still playing with a bunch of hand traps, because Tempai, unlike Sky Striker, Tempai cannot go first. It does not have the option that going first Tempai is really not really a thing in Master Duel. So and there's this funny, hilarious Tempai build going around that got like top rated duels last season, where it's like it's a stretch to even call it Tempai, because it plays 35 hand craps and 5 Tempai cards. I don't even think it played Sangan Summoning, because Sangan Summoning is not good going second. Like it really leans into the fact that it's not the Tempai cards that are good going second. It's every non-Tempai card that helps you win going second. You actually want to see the least amount of Tempai cards possible, because if you see multiple Tempai cards instead of hand traps, that'll lose you the game, because the Tempai cards themselves aren't playing through boards for shit. It's the board breakers, well, not the board breakers in this case, but it's the hand traps that let you go second. And when you play 35 hand traps, it's like taking Joshua Schmidt's Oops All Hand Trap decks and stretching it to like the perverse extreme, where you're just using it as a blind second to facilitate a Tempai OTK via crashing with Hita to search Genroku, as opposed to doing like the Fiendsmith stuff that Josh likes so much. But yeah, that deck is so funny. I'm not sure if that's how good it is, but like it's definitely something to look out for. I'm not sure if that's going to be very popular, because like that, it takes the psychopath to like seriously go into stage 2 queuing a deck as wild as that. But when it comes to Tempai, there's not very many ways to spice things up. So like that is one way to do so. And yeah, now we're on to like some of the top contenders from last month. So let's talk about the Orcust builds. So we have Orcust, Fiendsmith, Pure Orcust, and Mitzurugi Orcust. The main thing, again, always the main thing about whether you want to play Fiendsmith in Orcust or not, is basically just Dominus Impulse. Okay, it's either Fiendsmith or it's Dominus Impulse. If you play Fiendsmith cards, you can't play Dominus Impulse. If you want to play Dominus Impulse, you can't play Fiendsmith cards. So, yeah, that's basically it. Fiendsmith cards are good in their own right because Caesar is amazing, and like the Fiendsmith cards is a brickless engine that helps you. You know, any two monsters is full Orcust combo. Fiendsmith provides you two bodies in your sleep without adding any bricks. That's why it's good, and also Caesar is good now, so that's another bonus. But you know, it can't play Dominus Impulse, and Dominus Impulse is one of the best hand traps in the game. So that's one of the drawbacks. And yeah, pure Orcust. Not sure I like pure Orcust because low key pure Orcust kind of gets smashed by 5 mana and Draco Tail going first. Like normally normal summon Girsu, very few hand traps can actually handle normal summon Girsu. Like Imperm, Ash, Droll, none of those cards beat normal summon Girsu. Like you need 2+ hand traps to beat a normal summon Girsu normally, unless your specific hand trap is like Baldrake, which is like quite a bit niche, and like, you know, Bestios are also projected to be really bad this format because, you know, they're really bad against Draco Tail, the most played deck. But 5 mana is a hand trap that beats normal summon Girsu. You normal summon Girsu, you dump Hard Porter, your opponent goes 5 mana, fuse 2, make Arphalion, bounce Hard Porter, and bounce Girsu back to your hand. Well, yeah, your Girsu now is yeah, now your strongest 1-card combo just got blown up by the Arphalion. So that is possibly an issue right there with playing pure, and why playing a secondary engine to help extend past 5 mana into Arphalion is possibly the way to play, even though Dominus Impulse is really good. But you can't Dominus Impulse a turn 1 or turn 0 5 mana because your opponent controls no other cards. So that is, yeah, that is an issue. It's why I think Fiends of Orcust is still the best out of the 3 Orcust variants. Again, this is where you go into discussing Mitzurugi Orcust, because Mitzurugi Orcust, it lets you play Dominus Impulse, and it provides you a secondary engine to provide bodies to extend with. Whereas, you know, pure Orcust is just, it's like basically a hand trap deck. It runs more hand traps than fucking Malice does. So, and more hand traps than Draco Tail does. It's how much room for hand traps pure Orcust does, but it loses consistency, and obviously it loses its ability to play through disruption. But the Mitsurugi cards provide their own issues, though, because Orcust is a deck that already runs a ton of bricks, and Mitsurugi cards also have a ton of bricks in them, so you're running a deck that's like a quarter bricks, and you're also cutting space for hand traps to help going second, because, you know, Orcust is not very fantastic going second either without hand traps to back it up. So hard to say. I'm still leaning towards, I guess, Fiends is still the best. Not as convincing because lacking the ability to run Dominus Impulse strikes me to me as like a bigger deal this format than like most. And it also depends how much Lancia is being played. I didn't discuss Lancia yet when I talked about Malice, but you know, Lancia was like one of the most played hand traps last format. I am not sure on how much Lancia is going to be played at all. Like it could be not played at all. It could be played nearly as much as it was last format, depending on the prevalence of how many people stick with Malice, or like how many people realize Malice is still a good deck. But if there's less Lancia, then that helps Orcust obviously as well as a byproduct. So, well, like this, I'm like low key. I kind of want to put Malice as better than the Orcust variants. Like that's how. Am I crazy for thinking this? Like, man, that's. I did not. When Red Ransom was banned, I did not have myself putting Malice above any Orcust variant. But this is arguable. Now, on to the next deck. The Risio variants. Okay, these are the main two Risio variants, and like I put a Fiends of Risio here just to put it here. I'm gonna put Fiends of Risio. I always want to put Fiends of Risio on tier 3 because Fiends of Risio is, out of these three, you know, Onomat Risio and Mitsurugi Risio, Fiends of Risio is like probably the weakest, and like I should probably like represent that by showing it, by like putting it a tier difference. It's just that Fiends of cards, like, they complement Risio kind of well because Risio has a weakness in the troll. But if you play the Fiends of Engine and you get trolled, you can just pivot into Fiends of via Moon and do a Fiends of plays, and then Fiends of, as mentioned, Caesar is still an insanely good card. It's actually like probably this is like maybe the best Caesar's ever been because there's really only like one matchup where Caesar is bad against, which is Risio itself, and Risio usage has stagnated over the past few months, and even the Risio variants the Risio hybrid variants now, the secondary engine does get hit by Caesar, even if the main Risio engine does not, and also X is at 1, so it's hard drawing the X to out the Caesar immediately is also harder to do, and like that's the worst matchup Caesar in. Caesar against everything else you see here, like Caesar is insane versus everything else you see here besides exactly Risio. So playing the Fiends of cards to access Caesar, it's still like it's not bad. It's just Fiends of Risio in particular is probably the Risio variant that has the least access to the Risio cards itself, because it's probably not playing 7 Tachyon because XC's lock. So just that alone means that you're playing 3 less Rodas for your Risio cards, and obviously your Onomat cards and Mitsurugi cards bridge very easily into your Risio cards, whereas that's not really the case for Fiendsmith all the time. So anyways, Onomat Risio and Mitsurugi Risio are the best Risio variants, and low-key Risio is like a kind of a dark horse. Like I kind of really like Risio, like especially Onomat Risio, since Risio is one of those decks that can play into Draco Tail fairly decently, and also it doesn't really care about the 5 mana as much, because you can sometimes force out the 5 mana early by threatening cross with dual drive, so that they before you even make any XE, so that they have to if they want to 5 mana, they have to 5 mana and just bounce one of your single body level 4 monsters, which is like not very good value at all. Or traditional hand traps, stuff like Valor and Bell that people are running to catch our Valor to catch the Arphalion, or Bell to catch the Jesus Christ, what the spell trap cards. So the horn and the flame and the sting, those can all be belled. Bell is not good against any Risio variant. Like even Mitsurugi Risio, like Bell doesn't even work out half the time if you start with the Risio cards and have a cross up for the Bell too. But and then like playing into the Draco Tail board, you can summon all your level 4 monsters in defense, and it's like nice horn. It's not like you have a very crucial spell you have to resolve going second, so like the flame is whatever. Like you could I guess flame can hit the cross, can check the cross, I guess, but you also have ways, you have like tons of extension, and like they don't have really a lot of ways to like stop you from just spamming bodies. Like they can bounce stuff back to your hand, which you can then, like, a lot of times you can even resummon them if they're like Onomat cards, for example, because the Onomat cards can summon from hand or graveyard. And it's I wouldn't say it's like super favored one way or the other between Rising or Draco Tail, but like it's the non-engine people are running in order to hit Draco Tail do not hit Risio variants that much at all, and especially like if Retaliating Sea is deemed to be good, Risio is the best Retaliating Sea deck in the game, because you just start you just start with a free level 4 body on board and Floodgate Draco Tail. Like come on, man, that's crazy. Like I'm not even like considering that as a factor, but like you running Retaliating Sea so that you can hit Draco Tail, Mitsurugi, and like I guess that's 2 main things. I guess you could hit Striker or Fiends of Gemini, but you're not really playing Retaliating Sea for those matchups. But yeah, like if Risio wants, they can beat Draco Tail all it wants to with tech cards like that. And going first, Risio's Onomat Risio specifically is probably at this point, Risio Onomat is probably the best going first deck in the game right now, because you just get to choose which variant of FTK you want to do, you do you want to Protoss your opponent? Like Protoss is probably the most tame thing you can do out of like all of your options, because if it's not Protoss, then you are using Alan Burson to search heavy Featherstorm Duster, and then floodgating your opponent with Featherstorm Duster or Duster or Featherstorm, or if not that, you are literally making a Ptolemaeus to just turnscape your opponent. Like straight up, if you don't bring hand traps, and this is like Risio, Automat Risio is like one of the decks that necessitates you run hand traps for it, you will just auto lose. So yeah, Mitsurugi Risio, it's like I think between the two, I think Automat Risio is better. There's like some perks to Mitsurugi Risio in that the Mitsurugi cards bridge into the Risio cards very easily. Whereas, like, if you, and vice versa, Risio can bridge into Mitsurugi bridges into Risio because King of the Pharaoh Imps exists and so on and so forth. But if you open Risio cards, sometimes it's hard to bridge into the Automat cards with Risio without hard drawing the Automat cards. So, like, sometimes if you don't open, like, one of your, like, 7 or 8 plus Automat starters, then, like, sometimes you don't have access to the Automat engine, whereas you will always have access to both engines, provided like you don't get trolled or anything with a Mitsurugi Risio. That being said, you do have to run all the Mitsurugi bricks, which there are more Mitsurugi bricks than there are Automat bricks, surprisingly enough, and you don't generally have the room to run the FTK options that the Automat Risio decks can run with Mitsurugi Risio. But Mitsurugi Risio is still a solid deck. It's, if anything, there's like maybe an argument that it could be better, because it's like very slightly better going second because of the Mitsurugi cards, and it's like weaker and stronger versus different non-engine. But I guess being more vulnerable to Bell is also like maybe a negative, because if you start with the Mitsurugi cards, you could get hit by Bell harder than opposed to the Automat cards, which don't get hit by Bell really that much at all. So I'll keep this here, but yeah, I think these are Risio's still a good deck. Like, people just, play rate has gone down for whatever reason, but don't underestimate this at your own peril. Lunaite, also a deck whose play rate seem to have gone down. So it's weird, because Lunaite, in theory, you sound like you make double Liger Dancer plus Search Nibiru. Like, what deck is beating that? But it is so uncommon to make Liger Dancer right now. I don't think decks even really run dedicated outs to Liger Dancer, because the decks that don't run dedicated outs just run a shit ton of hand traps. Like, for example, Draco Tail. It is so often where you don't even get the Liger Dancer through Draco Tail, because Draco Tail runs like 17 plus hand traps, including 5 Minute, by the way, which is a pretty high impact hand trap versus Lunaite. And Lunaite gets hit by every hand trap. Like, there is not like a single hand trap being played that doesn't hit Lunaite in some way. Bell, Impulse, Droll. If people are still playing Lancia, there's Lancia. God forbid if people play Retaliating Sea. Good God, Retaliating Sea versus another fusion deck, that is disastrous. That would be disastrous for Lunaite. And like, you don't want to like play into Fua or Maxi, because even if your opponent doesn't play an out, what if they draw into another hand trap? And then you just gave your opponent a bunch of cards to still not end on double Liger Dancer. So it's like, yeah, I don't really have faith in Lunaite. I'm gonna be honest here. Like, I feel like between these two, like if I'm going second, I'm much more scared of my opponent being White Forest or Azamina than I am of my opponent being Lunaite. That said, Lunaite heavy fusion kind of goes hard. I'm not gonna lie. That is like one. It's not even the going first part with Lunaite and making a tower. It's the fact that Lunaite sometimes plays heavy polymerization, and then you just randomly get a Liger Dancer dropped on you for free going second. That's kind of funny, but that might be like the scariest thing about Lunaite. But yeah, and then tier Gemnite. I still think tier Gemnite is the worst way to play Gemnite, because like, it's maybe better into 5 mana, arguably, although that's still arguable, because what if you make a kit colorless and they just bounce your kit back to your extra deck? That doesn't seem that ideal either, to be honest. But Yeah, it's basically like if Gemini, instead of building an oppressive board and searching like 5 heralds, you just make a roll columns instead and play tier. Which I still think whatever stuff you do with the Fiends of Gemini is still stronger than whatever you can do with the tier engine. And the tier engine plays like a ton more bricks, or not a ton more bricks, but like if it's bigger. The tier engine is bigger, so like it has less room for non-engine, and like I kind of just don't trust tier. If I were to play a Fiendsmith combo deck, I would. It would be really hard to justify playing tier over like Fiendsmith Gemini, unless you just really want to play tier and like Kikalos is your waifu. Then like fair, but like for gameplay reasons, don't know about that. And branded, I feel like Brandon has like been, nothing has changed about Brandon for months. It's like kind of stagnated, and it's like been in the same spot on the tier list. It seems like I always put Brandon like really literally right next to tier so often, but yeah, Draco Tail. It's hard to tell if Draco Tail is like a good matchup or like a not good matchup for Branded. I will say Brandon appreciates there being less Malice, because I mean, like going second versus Malice, it's like, man, you don't want that. And also Malice being an impulse deck, you don't want to play against a deck playing impulse and Lancey as well. But yeah, 5 mana. It's there are decks that get hurt worse by 5 mana into Arthalion than Branded, and I'm talking about actual Branded, by the way. I'm not talking about Splash Branded and Draco Tail, which is like literally 3 Branded cards, 2 Branded Fusion, 1 Albaz. No, I'm talking about a fucking 60 card deck with 50 of those cards being pure Branded, being like actual real Branded cards. Okay, that's the brand I'm talking about here. And yeah, the fact that Brandon has a main phase 3 kind of low-key plays around 5 mana a bit, because 5 mana is main phase only, and therefore 5 mana, like you can't do 5 mana end of main phase, fuse with like a Argula, pop your Brandon spell and trap cards in the or anything, because you only get your Brandon spell and trap cards during the end phase. They could pop a Branded Lost, sure. But also, like, if they pop Lost, you have ways to recur to Lost during your main phase, or there are ways to get back to Lost as well. And yeah, actually, because low key, because you play so much in the end phase, and because what are they gonna bounce with Arthalion? Like, what are they gonna bounce like the Libellion back to your hand? Okay, cool, thanks. Are they gonna bounce the bounce the Mirror Jade back to your extra deck so that you can still use the Mirror Jade to banish their monster and then summon another Mirror Jade? Are they their best bet is to like probably bounce the Albion before you tribute it for the Libellion, which like that's not really that big of a deal. Like, I feel like to be perfectly honest. So low key, I might like Branded a bit. It's weird because Branded has seen. I've not seen that many Branded like played at all over the last few months. They've where did all the Branded players go? Like, I don't know what happened to them, but like they just I can maybe count on one hand the number of Branded players I played in the last few months. So but yeah, in theory, it's like it has quirks it can do into the play around like the 5 mana, and if you can play around the 5 mana, then it's a matter of like not getting owned by the other hand traps, which I guess because people are playing Bell and Baylors and Imperms now, at least more often than before, like that's kind of hella annoying, I'm not gonna lie, but it's you always have to deal with hand traps when playing Brandeds, and like I guess the fact that you can't play hand traps as well makes it, I mean, it's better now that there's no Malice that you're not hand trapping. So like, if you're playing a board breaker Branded build into Draco Tail, that actually sounds more fine. Even though if they do play Sting and Flame are probably the most annoying. Flame, like for obvious reasons, if you don't open a droplet, they can negate your Brand Fusion. But Sting also cuts off like your Retribution plays in the grave and gets rid of an Albaz like that. Yeah, it sounds like a very intricate matchup that I have not had much experience in as I would have liked, because Branded versus Branded Draco Tail is not a very common matchup, surprisingly. Mitsurugi card. So the Mitsurugi decks. Mitsurugi, I think, has gone a bit better since the introduction of Draco Tail. Since like I guess like well I this is like a small buff to all decks, but like Malice got nerfed, so like that's kind of a buff to basically every deck that's not Malice, and that's not exactly Fiends of Gemini, but yeah. So Mitsurugi, besides the standard stuff, Mitsurugi can play Dominance Impulse, or it can play Fiendsmith. So again, it's whether you want to play the better hand trap or have access to Caesar and like more game plans around Droll. At the same time, Droll has seen maybe a slight decrease in usage. I don't see every Draco Tail list running Droll like how I saw it, like how like almost every deck, 69% of decks were playing Droll last format. I don't see it being as high, so like that's a positive for Mitsurugi. Also, like this may be another point tilting in favor of pure Mitsurugi over Fiends of Mitsurugi, because I've seen people play Shifter in Mitsurugi, because technically your shit doesn't need to hit the graveyard, it just needs to get tributed. So yeah, I just Shifter those detail players, man. Shifter versus that's great, but if you Shifter versus a Rising opponent, that may not be as good as you want. But the fact that this is one of the few decks that can even consider playing Shifter as an option, the other being Malice, which is like, yeah, probably Malice is the better Shifter deck, but that's why I'm leaning towards like pure Mitsurugi being better than Fiends of Mitsurugi. I haven't actually really seen that many Fiends of Mitsurugi variants at all, for that matter. It's mainly, if I see a Mitsurugi variant, it's like 90% it's Risio, and then like the rest of the time it's pure Mitsurugi without the Fiends of Vengeance. So I'd say it's a solid option. We'll see if it continues to be like a solid option going forward. That being said, Vimena can be annoying, because like the most important thing about your like end board generally in Fiends in like pure Mitsurugi is like your spell and traps, basically like your prayers and like your purification if you run that. So like if they have an Urgula active, they can like end of main Vimena, make Arthalion, Urgula, pop your spell trap, pop your prayers, and then like bounce one of your, I don't know, bounce IP, or like bounce something back to your hand, and like that can be annoying. They do also have to discard a card if you have a Murakumo on the field, though, so like there you go, really minus on hand advantage too. But yeah, it's another one where like it's not obvious which deck clearly wins the matchup, but it's intricate and like going both ways. Dragonmaid. So the reason I put Dragonmaid in here mainly is to talk about the Dragonmaid-Draco Tail variant that's been floating around. I'm going to say right now, I think Dracomaid is ass. It exacerbates the problems with like both decks. Well, it doesn't exacerbate the problem. It introduces a problem to Draco Tail, and it doesn't really help the problems with Dragonmaid, because I'm still not sure. Is there a way to bridge Draco Tail cards into Dragonmaid cards? Am I like missing something here? Because if not, it's just it's just two independent engines that sometimes if you draw them together, it's nice, but like they can't bridge into each other, and like it introduces a problem into Draco Tail in that normally Draco Tail doesn't really have a problem with normal summons. But you add the Dragonmaid cards, and you suddenly have a deck that runs a shit ton of normal summons in place of hand traps. So that's kind of weird, and it doesn't increase the Dragonmaid consistency. It just increases the chances of you playing Draco Tail, which is like, at that point, why are you playing the Dragonmaid cards and like clogging up your Draco Tail cards with the Dragonmaid? I'm not really sure about that. Like, I will put that, if I was to rate that as a variant, I would rate it here in Rogue, because like I really don't think it benefits either Dragon. I don't think it benefits either Dragonmaids or Draco Tails that much. Like it might make Dragonmaid play like a better deck, but it has nothing to do that. It has very little to do with the Dragonmaid cards at that point. It's more because you're playing Draco Tail cards in your Dragonmaid deck that your Dragonmaid deck plays slightly better. But yeah, it's if you don't play with the Draco Tail cards, you still have the consistency problems with the Dragonmaid cards, and the fact that you play a lot of engine requirements and a lot of bricks, and like, it's why it's down here. If it plays the game, it's quite good, but doesn't play the game quite often. And if you add the Draco Tail cards to the Dragonmaid cards, it doesn't help you play. You're just playing Draco Tail with less hand traps a lot of the time. But it feels like stun. So I think stun is so bad right now. There's this one guy that topped 2 months ago with stun. In like top 10 rated. I think that's the last time I ever saw stun do anything for like this entire year or something. So number one, the Morgana shit and like the trying to tribute summon Vanity's Fiend or Vanity's Ruler and like all that stuff. You're trying to play like a combo Morganite stun build. Don't sure, but go ahead, do that. But like that's not gonna make your stun deck good. That's gonna make your stun deck even more bricky because the last thing a stun deck needs is to play more cards that aren't floodgates, and then you suddenly open multiple Morganite cards and not any floodgates or things to protect your floodgates, and you just lose turn one. Like you got to get to turn 3 in order to get the benefits of the Morganite card in the first place. And like, what are you trying to play a combo deck? Like here, no, like you're not trying to draw multi-card combos to try and tribute some advantages. Okay, like just play. If you want to if you want to end on like a floodgate, Gemini Fiends is a more consistent way to end on a floodgate on board than to play Morgana stun combo stun, whatever the hell that is. But if you're not playing that, then you're probably playing Barrier Statues, and there's a big problem with the Barrier Statues. Okay, the best Barrier Statues, or the most commonly played Barrier Statues, are Water and Earth. Okay, so you see the problem with that is that Draco Tail Arphalion is Earth, and Draco Tail Gulamel is Water. So the two main Draco Tail fusion monsters can be fusion summoned under Barrier Statues. That is really ass. I'm not gonna lie, because if you can fusion summon them, you can also use Urgula as material, so you can pop their back row, or you can use Pan as material and pop their floodgate monsters while fusion something. That sounds terrible. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds really bad. Yeah, I'm putting it down here. Please don't bring stun to my Draco Tail games. Thank you very much. Voiceless Voice. So Voiceless Voice. Is a very good card, a very good deck versus Malice, and a very good deck versus Risio going first. Well, it was, and then the Mitzurugi cards came, and the Mitzurugi cards kind of complicated the situation because like, Saravis is not good against Mitsurugi cards whatsoever, and you know what else Saravis isn't good against? It's not good against Draco Tail cards. In fact, I feel like the Draco Tail matchup sounds really bad for Voiceless Voice. To be honest, like if they run Sting is a big deal because Sting gets rid of prayers and it gets rid of the Saphira in the graveyard, so it gets rid of your fusion summon, or it gets rid of your ritual summon, and it gets rid of your floating, so that if they ever move your Skull Guardian, if you somehow even get to it, then it doesn't float anymore, and it's like vulnerable to Arphalion bouncing, and like, yeah, I don't know, man. This between the Mitsurugi cards and the Draco Tail cards, I don't have much confidence in Voiceless Voice this format to the point where I'm dropping it down a little bit. It can run Purge, but like Purge is like not as good as Impulse. And I'm not gonna lie, it's the only deck that's really good at running Purge is like Odon, because Odon runs both Purge and Impulse and Songs of the Dominator, so like it runs 9 Dominus traps. Purge by itself not fantastic, so I wouldn't even play Purge in Voiceless Voice. And yeah, Saravis, not that great of an endboard piece, but Skull Guardian is also not fantastic as an endboard piece because it's one Omni Negate. Like, and this deck doesn't. It's not like this deck has like an overwhelming amount of room for non-engine to back that up either. So, yeah, it seems a bit rough for Voiceless Voice. I'm not gonna lie. It's Mermail. So Mermail. This section at like the bottom of like tier 3 is always a little weird because Mermail, in theory, Mermail seems okay, but like in practice, I have not seen Mermail in so long, and I don't really have a good reason why. I guess it's Mermail versus Fibena. Sometimes it's not ideal. Sometimes you normal summon Net Abyss and it just gets bounced, and that's GG. It's not good into Fool Loss. It's not good into Maxi. It's not good into Droll. Still kind of scary facing going first. The fact that people are playing Bell and Veilers now means that those hand traps do not stop Mermail whatsoever. So like that's a good thing for Mermail. Going second, you're not even beating Draco Tail going second unless you get a really good hand, like we're talking Poseidra target, and like hope they don't run Sting for like your Mermail monsters. Ubel. So Ubel is like Ubel is kind of like White Forest, except bad into Maxi. Better into Droll, but like it runs the same moderate amount of trash cards that White Forest does. You know, it's when White Forest it runs like all of the necessary spell and trap engine requirements, whereas Ubel runs the Ubels. And unfortunately, if you get Charming or Maxied as Ubel, you don't have the backup plan that the White Forest has. So yeah, I'm kind of putting here. It's also like not great going second. It's bad. It's okay versus Dominus Impulse. It's not great. It can self-troll itself at the very least, but yeah, it's also like not great into it's not great into bounces because they bounce your Dark Meddling Beast or they bounce your Lotus. Worst case scenario back to your hand. Like that's so hard to play through for Ubel. Fire King and Snake Eyes, either pure quote unquote pure Fire King, could be Dirac Fire King, could be the branded Fire King deck that I showed, which like I probably don't recommend that unless you're like a real Fire King enthusiast, or like Snake Eyes Fire Kings and just like straight up Snake Eyes Fiends, Snake Eyes Slop, that stuff. It's really hard to say because these decks are like nowhere to be seen. First of all, these I'm not like there. A lot of these decks, like you just down here, you just don't face them in ladder really often at all. Fire King included. It's been like months since I've played against another opponent playing Fire King cards. Like I've seen Snake Eyes maybe like once or twice, and they didn't draw enough to really make that much of an impression. Fire King had like a niche of like being really good into Mitzurugi cards back when Mitzurugi cards were really popular because they blow up your Fire King monsters with Murakumo. Like, oh no, what am I gonna do? You destroyed my monsters. Yeah, the Draco Tail matchup can be rough if they play Sting. Not every Draco Tail deck runs Sting, but Sting just happens to be. It seems so good versus so many matchups. I don't know, but yeah, you can summon cards in defense, and if you summon cards in defense, it's fine. But I will say Flame on Fire King Island is also a pretty big deal. It's massive. Not having a check for Fire King Island is actually like quite rough, and it's not like Fire King Snake Eyes in particular has the room, or just Fire King in general has the room to run enough non-engine to reliably stop this. That being said, you do run Dominus Impulse, so being able to run Dominus Impulse is positive. So, I mean, I kind of want to like either like high Rogue or like low tier 3, like very bottom tier 3 or high Rogue is like seems maybe appropriate. Snake Eyes is it's like similar to Fire King, except it doesn't have the ability to run Impulse. but it's maybe slightly better extension, maybe slightly, because they can run the Millennium cards. Millennium cards are like slightly better into Disruption, better into stuff like 5 mana, forces more stuff out. You have maybe more pushes. Although you can also pop whatever they target with the Arthalion with Kieran as well. So like there's some. It's not hopeless. Going second into the end board for Draco Tail actually is like Fire King is not good at playing into the Draco Tail end board. It doesn't look like. Same with like Snake Eyes to a similar extent. So I'll keep these here, borderline, and Primera, Centurion. Man, do I really want to put Centurion down here? Like this is not the meta for Centurion. Like, boy, you got Did I mention Centurion Dragon was a card? Because if I didn't, Centurion Dragon is a card, and yeah. So no Auxilia, no Primera, Trudea only. Trudea only speedrun. It's not like this deck was even good at playing through Disruption in the first place, let alone specifically targeted floodgates for itself. Seems not good going second. Bestios aren't good. You're probably going to be playing Magistus, Centurion, which is actually not bad. The deck's quite fun, but it's like obviously like it's way worse as a Magistus. It's probably one of the worst Magistus decks. It's like worse. I don't even have Fiends. I don't even have Risio Magistus here because like that deck is already kind of outdated and power crept, and like Onomat is just strictly better than the Magistus cards for Risio, it seems like. But that like this is maybe like the worst deck that plays the Magistus engine as well. So and then Regenesis. So Regenesis, dude, it's so bricky. Like it's just so bricky, and like specifically the tech cards, the tech 2500 attack and defense monsters that you have available to you aren't that good in this format, especially into stuff like Draco Tail. The most common ones are like Bestials. Bestials are not great. The Chaos Hunter again with Malice being less play, it's debatable whether Chaos Hunter is even worth playing, to be honest, for like only 2 matchups. One of them who's play rate has seemingly theoretically Malice play rate drops quite a bit with the ban list, so like Chaos Hunter loses a bit of its value. Hashira Unicorn is like, I mean, it's all right. It's also at 2, and like Raveslav is at 1. Is like this. The Lava Golem is not great. Like, it's not even live a bunch of times. But like, what you're gonna Lava Golem and Arthalia and a Gulamel? Like that's not worth it. It's I'm Regenesis, and like it's still it also does struggle playing into boards. Like you can't summon your monsters in attack, which was because of Horn, which then that's really like what you apply no pressure when you just summon a bunch of big dudes in defense and you can't turn and you don't use the extra deck. Like that's actually kind of a bummer. Speaking of bummer, Cristron, Smigers, and Parrots. So I was prepared for I was waiting for a day where Lancia usage would finally drop off, because literally right after this won the Worlds qualifiers, Lancia just became a staple in Master Duel for like ever since, and then that just like boned Cristron, and it's still hard to say. Like I'll put it here on the assumption that Lancia's usage does decrease, but what do I know? Like Malice could still be a top 5 deck or like a top 3 deck, and then Lancia would still see a high usage, high amount of play among the higher ratings and stuff like that, and then like Cristron would still be kind of it's like never has a deck success been so dependent on another deck's success like Cristron is with Malice. Maybe when we get the K9 stuff, then like things will change, but like as of right now, like playing the like Draco Tail, it's Tristram is okay. There's worse decks that can play into 5 mana playing the Draco Tail. So Blue Eyes, I thought Blue Eyes was like very good last format, and Blue Eyes now if you were to design a deck to specifically counter Blue Eyes, I don't think you could get much. I don't think you could get like much further away than like just playing that like exactly Draco Tail. Draco Tail, it seems like almost perfectly designed, like specifically just to counter Blue Eyes and the troll Kaiba. Because like number one, Centurion Dragon. Again, your entire deck is spellcasters and dragons. So they have them having on-demand Centurion Dragon is just absolutely abysmal. Also, like there are some decks that can play into a Draco Tail end board. You are never playing. Blue Eyes is never able to play into a Draco Tail end board. Like it's just not happening. The everything they play, every disruption they have hurts. Horn bouncing your normal summon before you can link it into Spirit, the Link 1 hurts. That they have Flame to like be able to always counter negate your wishes or your Drill Beam or Lordly Load, which negates it for like the whole. I think it negates it for like the whole turn. Yeah, so it just negates both Lordly Load's effects. Sting is like so. It's arguably like even the worst of the 3 traps to play against, because not only does it banish your maidens and your blue eyes in graveyard, but it also banishes your wishes so that you can't make a Tyrant Dragon. And Tyrant Dragon is your best option, your best tool for going second, and they just cut that off completely. Like just the traps alone is so hard to deal with, and that's not even accounting for 5 mana fusion summon into Centurion Dragon. Like that's ass. Like that alone, if Draco Tail is the most common matchup, like that alone drops. I had Blue Eyes like at the bottom of tier 2, like the best tier, as like the higher, better than the rest of tier 3. I really can't say it anymore because of like this is like a huge. This could be like a generational drop off for Blue Eyes, depending on how popular and how common the Draco Tail matchup is, because that doesn't sound fun. At the very least, like I guess you do run more hand traps yourself than even Draco Tail does. So at the very least, you can try to run the hand traps to prevent them from getting to the full end board. Don't know how realistic that is, because like after Ash, like your quality of hand traps to stop them kind of drops off. Like you can Valor the Arphalions, Drain Permanent Arphalions. You can try to purge K2s, but like if they get one fusion off with a 5 mana, or they just hard draw the 5 mana and infuse and then set a trap, like it's already pretty rough for you. Going first, I guess it's a bit better. Going first, and Purge is better because Purge can negate the whole K2 effect, even with their bonus effect fuse. I don't know if Purge is even worth running, to be honest. I'm just like spitballing out here, ideas for Blue Eyes, because Blue Eyes is one of the decks that I also play quite a lot, just as like a reliable option that plays a ton of hand traps to try to reduce the variance that is Master Duel. But yeah, I'll put this here. Like Lunaite also has the issues playing into Draco Tail, so yeah, I used to have Blue Eyes like literally here. This is like actually a bigger fall off than like it may even seem. And speaking of fall off, Momento. Has anyone played against Momento in like the last 3 months? Because like I literally haven't. We're at the Momento players have just gone. I don't know where the Momento players went. Like I seriously don't know. The deck is like obviously it's not the best. Like if you're playing a combo deck, Risio and Malice are just better than Momento for less. Like they're like easier and they're better. So like why would you, I guess, spend all that effort playing Momento just to play like a worse combo deck? Also Mitzurugi and like Fiends of Gemini, and like this deck is hard to play. It takes effort, and it's like for that effort you get like a lower payoff, or like you barely get a bigger payoff than like any of the other combo decks. That most of them all the other combo decks already win if they do their easy ass 1-card combo and it resolves. Like you don't need a slightly stronger board, but also having to spend that much brain power, I guess. And like going second, being a board breaker deck, that's an issue. And 5 mana, low key kind of annoying if you're not playing the Fiends of Engine as an extension. So I don't. This is definitely better than Ubel, right? Like Momento. I, I can't. It's hard to say because nobody's. Where are the Memento players at? Give me your opinion. Why did you personally stop playing Memento if you did? I would like to know that answer. But I can't, yeah, like I can't put it higher than like remember like these decks down here. These are like the bottom tier. I can't. The reason they're bottom tier is because they're bottom of this tier is because I literally have not seen them in months. Like they don't exist. So yeah, that's my opinion on the best decks and the meta heading into this Duelist Cup. And of course, let me know anything you disagree with or like what I got wrong. Because if you watch this far, that's the least I can do. The least I can do is like get roasted by everyone who's watched the whole thing. But yeah, thank you.